Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Alicia Jarrett. Alicia is a passionate and driven global real estate investor based out of Australia, conducting deals in the United States. She co-owns multiple businesses, including Global Citizens Holdings, Inc., Land Scouts, and Supercharged Offers. Focused on leadership in business and investing in land, her business ventures provide efficient real estate marketing and world-class data solutions, which assists other real estate investors to digitally transform their businesses for increased results. AJ, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Kendall, I'm so good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing so well now that we get to chat again.
We are one of each other's favorite people when it comes to this stuff.
Hands down.
People are going to have to bear with us as we have lots of fun on this. But isn't it interesting when I hear my bio read out, I still to this day go, that person he's talking about.
Who is that? Wait a minute, I did do that. It's so exciting to join you again for this Masterclass series. This is our second part of the Masterclass, and last week was such a blast. It's always a treat to get to talk to you. But today I'm super extra excited because we're talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is growth and scaling. That's where a lot of the fun happens. And so super excited to talk about
They
this.
are two different things, growing and scaling.
Absolutely.
A lot of people use it interchangeably and think it's the same. No, it's not. Let's break this down. So yeah, I'm super excited about today's topic as well, Kendall. Lots we can talk about here.
I love it. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about the differences between growing and scaling, because we, just like you mentioned, we hear that term used interchangeably, but there is a distinct difference. So let's talk about some of those distinct differences.
There is. Yeah. And I think, again, if someone's, I want to grow my business, the growth happens across all facets of the business. So while you might grow and do more deals, you tend to add more people, more processes, more systems in order for everything to grow at the same pace, right? That's growing, right, is doing more deals, but having the infrastructure with your people, processes, and systems, not necessarily staying the same, but staying in control. So you're doing more, but getting more efficient across things. So you're scaling your ability to do more without adding necessarily to your operating costs. So think again, just to repeat that, folks, growing overall is growing all facets of your business. Everything that your business involves in, your operating costs increase at the same time that your deal costs might increase. Scaling is doing more, but not having those operating costs increase out of control, right? So what does that equate to at the end of the day? What we're really looking at here is almost like cost per deal, cost per lead, that kind of stuff. Because if you can start to get some of those numbers in your business and understand what drives your business and where you have to spend to do more, but equally where you can pull back on that spend to also do more, that gives you a really good lens to look at things that might need to be tweaked or become more efficient.
That's really important distinction. So the way that I look at it as well is, just to break it down even more, is growing your business is actually, you are making your operations larger. You're making your team larger. You're making the resources that you have larger. And scaling is doing more business with that growth. Is that right?
All right. Yeah, I love that explanation. I think you explained it better than what I did.
No, I just not at all. Not at all. I just like to think about it like in even the simplest terms, because again, there's so many, even just in the terms that we just talked about just now, there's so many people that use those interchangeably, right?
Yeah,
and so let's really get down to the nitty-gritty and split hairs here and make those big distinctions different, right?
Let's just go back to the reason why that distinction is so important, because a lot of people are like, I really want to grow my business. And then they want to go from 2 deals a month to 10 deals a month, which is excellent. But what they notice with that is, hey, Jason, when they're going through that growth phase, all of a sudden they're like, they've gone from 1 VA to 5 VAs. They've gone from paying 1 person in a CRM to paying 6 people in a CRM. And all of a sudden, and it's like the list could go on with a whole range of things, right? More marketing costs, more this, more that. But so then they end up doing more deals. But what they notice is their profit per deal is often not what they expected, because their costs have incrementally gone up too. So whenever anyone is thinking about growing their business, and interestingly enough, one of the first things that we get customers to do when they work with us is fill in what's called a business growth plan. You had to fill one in, Kendall, remember? What are some of the
Absolutely.
questions we ask you in there? What's your target? What are your KPIs? What are you aiming for? But equally, what are your systems that you need to look at to help scale that business by having the right support mechanisms in place? So I think it's really important for people when they've got these lofty goals of wanting to do X, really thinking about how do you do that, but at a stage and a pace and a cost structure that doesn't all of a sudden override your whole business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that with all of the information out there today, it's not a secret, right? Like how to actually grow. We've all heard things about virtual assistants and adding more people and adding integrators and adding CRMs and the technology. That's a whole other can of worms that you can get in the red pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
With all of those different resources. But the question is, are you actually doing enough business to support that amount of growth? And are you getting as much as you possibly can out of every dollar that you put into your business?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Great way to look at it. And even in just saying that, when you are adding on processes, systems, people, all the stuff that costs money, I really think people should think about that in a number of ways before they push go on that, because it's the right timing. First of all, so when's the right time to add people, process, systems, etc.? What's the right structure to put in place for that? How much are you willing to spend on that stuff to get the return that you're looking for? And are you maximizing all of those channels as well? And what I mean by that is talking to a customer the other day, and they've got a VA. The VA, they're literally paying a full-time resource, but they're sitting there working part-time. I'm like,
Mhm.
that's not good. That's not scaling. That's just costing you money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to be fully candid here. When I first started my business, my real estate business, way back before I even got into land, I looked at it like I had to do, what is my business going to look like in 10 years? Or what did I want it to look like in 10 years? Now, let me set up all of those things on day one before I even get to that 10-year version of my business.
Yeah,
And
right.
because it's like, hey, if I
We did the same. Don't worry, you're not alone.
I think everyone does that because you want to make room for that growth and that scale. And you're like, I can't imagine doing business at that volume without setting up all of the things. And what that
Yeah,
really did for me was just made it so much harder to get any type of traction because I was trying to build things out, like you said, way
yeah,
before I had the resources or the money to be able to do that. And
yeah,
so that brings me to my next question, which is if someone is like a solopreneur, they are like the only person in their business,
mhm.
what's the very next step for them in terms of growth or scale? What does that even look like?
Oh, that's a big question. Let's break that down first of all. It's funny just listening to you talk before. Do you remember on last week's call, we were talking about where do you begin in your business? And I just said, when we first started, our entire CRM was run off Google Sheets because we
Yes.
didn't know
Yes.
what good looked like at that point. We didn't know like how we wanted to run our business and what are the bottlenecks. So we literally started it on Google Sheets. So let's use that as an example to your question, right? Because when we were newbies, that's what we did. When we got to that point that we realized that there was enough volume of tasks in that sheet for our team, then it became, how do we want those tasks to be managed? When we say managed, that doesn't necessarily mean a person is managing them, but what are the processes and systems that we want to put in place to take this deal from here to here? What's the bouncing ball and follow it through? The next thing that we looked at is once we've got the right processes in place, how do we train up the people to manage those processes? So think again, when someone's starting out, and we see this time and time again, and I talked about this last week as well, folks, you get to that tipping point where you get super busy. And the first thing that people do is go, great, let me go and hire a person and plug that hole. But the busyness doesn't stop because then we end up with a people problem. And now we're managing people and resources. So the first thing that I think people should do is think through the lens of system and process. So what is the system or process I can do to implement at a low cost to manage that thing for me? If it exists, great, plug and play. If it doesn't exist, can you create it? Or are there other people out there that have got an alternative to your process or system that you're looking at that could get you the same outcome, but maybe look at how you get there a little differently? And that's the other thing I think when you're growing, or then when you get to the tipping point that you're now scaling because everything is really bedded down, because that's to me the tipping point there as well, is when you're looking at how to get to an outcome, don't be wedded to what your idea of that looks like. Because we had a lot of things as we were in a growth phase before we got to a scale phase, because they are two distinct phases, that we thought we knew what good looked. And then we went and we implemented a CRM that we needed to do a lot of customization to. But through that customization, it actually forced us to look at getting to our end outcome even differently. And that was a good thing, right? So sometimes you've got what you think is a good outcome in mind or how to get to that outcome, but in a growth phase, be open to the fact that there might be a different way to get there that's better than what you know. Because the thing when you are in growth phase, you only know what you know.
Yes.
Okay. There's other stuff out there that you don't know yet. And that's okay.
Absolutely. And that's a really fantastic point, is that they are two distinctly different phases. Growth is different from scaling. And I often equate it when I'm talking to my students about growing the business. The first thing that we always take a look at is we have to develop systems. How are we doing anything to make it a replicatable process? So one person can go out and talk to sellers and figure out some kind of, just pick up the phone and do whatever it takes to get that seller on the phone, and then do whatever it takes to get the next step of the acquisition process, get that contract signed, and throughout the life cycle of the deal, that do whatever it takes, that scrappy kind of mentality.
Yep.
But whenever you are growing, you have to make sure that you're translating those whatever it takes activities into a system, right? And I feel, and I know whenever I was in that process, it can often feel like you are in the middle of an ocean, right? On a boat that you're trying to get to the next shore while you're trying to build your boat, right? So it's like you're building it and it has to work all at the same time. So
I use the analogy that we're flying an airplane at the same time we're building it. It's the same concept, right?
Exactly.
Let's put a wing on over here. Oh, we're going to need landing gear. Let's put that on now.
And we're still airborne.
Yeah, exactly. And you're still floating. So yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's a great analogy to use. Yeah.
So how would you advise someone how can they build their airplane while still flying it? Hey, land fans, looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the OnlyLandFans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at OnlyLandFansGroup.com and join the conversation today. That's OnlyLandFansGroup.com. See you there.
I think, it's again, big question, right? How they can build it while they're still flying it is, I would break it down into every quarter. What is the growth that I want in the business every quarter? So if I'm a newbie starting out and my first goal is to get a first deal, great. Once you've got that deal, in the next quarter, do you want to go from 1 deal a month to 2 deals a month? Okay, over those. And the reason why I'm breaking it down per quarter is a month goes by way too fast, and a quarter kind of feels like a nice chunkable size of time to achieve the next phase of growth. So if we want to go from 1 deal to 2 deals, let's map out the process of what it took to get 1 deal. And in all of those processes, what can be easily replicated to go from 1 to 2? That doesn't mean you need to add on more stuff, more things, more bright, shiny objects. Once we know what that looks like, then let's map out the right process first. So process always before people. Cannot say that and more, right? Process before people. Because when you've got people, like that thing you were saying before, right? The doer who's getting in touch with the seller and nurturing the lead and doing this and doing this. A doer is great. But if they're just working on their own and not following the right SOPs and processes, if that person leaves or they're not working out and you need to get a new person, guess what? A lot more headaches. So really at that stage of what does that next quarter of growth look like? Map out what are all the different processes, steps, systems to go from 1 to 2. Then in each of those, really just get detailed and clear on what are your SOPs, so your standard operating processes. Now, that might sound big and overwhelming to people. It's not. It's actually really simple. To do an SOP is really to look at a task, so any individual task, and to go, what is the outcome of that task? What needs to happen before that task so that you're knowing that there's a line of process involved? And then once that task with all the steps has been completed, what's next after that task? So I think people often look at their SOPs in isolation of just this. It is this, but what needs to happen before that thing and what then happens after that thing? Because your SOPs need to be sequential and they need to flow into one another. Otherwise, it just is just one thing. With your SOPs, guys, for anyone listening, the easiest way to do your SOPs is on each of those tasks. Even more awesome if you've got a team member. If you don't have a team member, that's okay. Record yourself. Get on Loom or Zoom or whatever it is. Record yourself doing that thing and talking through step 1, click here. Step 2, go here, type this in. Step 3, click here, go submit. Now, whatever it is, do that out, record it, literally upload it to something like Descript, or there's hundreds of tools out there now. A lot of them are free as well. Upload it, get it transcribed, edit it, done. There's your SOP. And insert the video into it, because you will have different people join your business that will want to have something they can read step by step. Some might want to watch a video and see what you were doing. So there's your SOP done. Do that for every single thing. Now you can do more of that and grow at the same time.
I absolutely love that. I was literally just reading about that in Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. He calls it the camcorder method, where you just literally are recording yourself doing the thing. And then that becomes a video playbook. You can even have someone on your team who you plan on taking over that task to actually write it out, because that's another level and layer to get them to do that. And what they're doing as well is they're building out your playbook that you're going to have forever in your business, right? So it's a living document. One of the things that you mentioned that I just love is that you said that you're documenting what you're doing, and you're also thinking about what did it take to get that one deal done, right? And what I love so much about that is I see a lot of people that are brand new and they say, okay, I know I need to build out my SOPs. I know I need to create some systems and processes, but they try to do it in a vacuum. They do it before they actually do the thing. And so what I've seen happen is they will start building out all of these different steps before they've ever had to do it. And so that typically leads to either really brief SOPs that don't really cover what needs to happen, or it's a way long drawn out process because it was created in a vacuum. And it's, wait, we're doing like 20 extra things and we don't need to do that.
Correct. And then you've got to go back and rework them all, right? So again, really ask yourself, what do I need at this point in time that's going to get me to the next point in time? In those beginning stages, you might only write out once you've done a couple of seller calls, like for anyone new, maybe they've done a few seller calls and now they understand like what conversation flow they want to have happen. And after they finish a call, what is the next step to do in a system or a Google Sheet or whatever after that call? Once you've done a few of them and you know what good looks like, then write out your SOP, then do your scripting, then do all that stuff. But don't feel like you need everything up front. Because again, the other factor, we talk about growth and scaling when it comes to your operating costs. I also include in our operating cost time, because time is a cost.
Absolutely.
So really think about, where is your time spent and what is that doing? What can I outsource? What can I insource? What can I systematize? And in all of those things, always ask yourself, what is the activities I'm doing that's moving the needle? Because if you're stuck in just writing SOPs and not actually talking to sellers or buyers, you ain't moving the needle.
You're not moving the needle. Absolutely. And that's so good. And I love that you include time as a cost, because it absolutely is. It absolutely is. Just like energy, in my opinion, is also a cost. What are you spending a lot of your energy on that just zaps you for the rest of the day? That's a cost, right? And the other thing is, I think that when people are creating SOPs, it's important to realize that is a very personal set of processes personal to your specific business, right?
Yeah.
So what works in my business is not going to work in your business and vice versa, because we have different resources, we have different team members, we have different sizes of staffs. And so it's important to write your SOPs specifically for you, right? So if you're sitting down and you're writing, okay, what do I want my lead process, my lead process to be? How am I processing the leads? Well, if you're building out an ideal SOP and that has two different VAs and you don't have VAs yet, then that may not be the best SOP for your specific business, right?
Yeah.
Just time. If you don't have the time to call people, or if you know that you're working a full-time job and you say, I want to call every lead that comes in within 10 minutes, and you know that you can't physically do that because you're working a 9-to-5 job, then don't put in your SOP, because while that might work for someone that's doing land full time, it's not going to work for you. It's just going to be a whole bunch of frustration, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing I would recommend is once a quarter, go back and review your SOP, because stuff changes and moves all the time. So keeping them current also means that, again, if you're in a scale mode, so if you're out of growth mode and you're now into scaling, what you're going to have to also monitor is different nuances and changes in your business of things getting more efficient, or systems changing, or people making things more efficient. And always go back and update stuff as you go, because the thing is, when you're in a scale mode, what you don't want to have doing is SOPs that are requiring people to do rework or have to go and look something up that makes their time not efficient because the SOP is not correct. So make it a practice to even do it together as a team once you've got a team and stuff as well. Every so often, get together and review stuff. Is this still current? Does this still work? Can we make this better? Where in this SOP can we save time or make it more efficient? Because by the time you've got resources underneath you and you've really given them the right tools to be successful, if you got good people, they're going to come up with some great ideas around this stuff as well, and really leverage that when you're in a scale phase.
I love that. I also love that you were talking about planning and looking at things by quarter and what's going to be coming up in the following quarter. I know a lot of people that make a lot of money but they don't plan at all. And that's okay. It's not for everyone, but it makes growing and scaling significantly harder when you're not planning and you're not being intentional and setting up a plan of attack to be able to grow your business. It happens by accident versus by intention. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, let's say someone has grown their resources a bit. They have a virtual assistant, they've got a CRM, they've got a pretty consistent marketing cadence. And so now they have enough data. Maybe they are 2 quarters into the year. They have enough data to know, okay, this is what we're doing from an operation standpoint. I send out this much mail, I get this many leads. All of that they're starting to get a pretty good handle on their metrics.
Yep.
How can they increase revenue in their business and maximize the resources that they have without spending more money prematurely than they actually have to?
Love it. Yeah. Here's what I do. Couple of things. Number one, learn to dominate a market. If you've got a couple of counties that you've done deals in, keep going in those counties. And when I say keep going, I'm talking like every quarter you're marketing to that county. We've now got some counties that we've been doing for 7 years, and we now have a really good buyers list there. We've got builders and developers that we can sell lots to. We're known. So sellers, the more that they see you, the more that you become front of mind over other people that they might only see once. So really think about those economies of scale when it comes to how can I dominate a market so that my processes in that market become completely repeatable. My data is the same. My message out to them is the same with its cadence. Every quarter, I'm sending them this or this. My buyers list is getting bigger every time. Because what that then means is when you start to get to that stage that your buyers list is good and people are inquiring a lot, you get to the cadence and that velocity of money where the minute you get a deal under contract, you're managing your CRM effectively. You should be able to push that deal out to maybe a couple of hundred buyers that are in your CRM that are looking for properties in that area, or maybe they bought properties from you before in that area, and hopefully sell your deal before you have to then go through the process of advertising it, putting it on land.com, getting all your photos done. all the other stuff that adds to the time and energy factor, right? So the more that you can dominate a market, the better. The other thing in that market is expand the market. What I mean by that is if you've dominated an area for infill lots, now add on a new strategy in that area, add on acreage, add on recreational land, add on different things. Because again, in that market, if you've got a realtor in that market, title company, probate person that all work that area, you're going to look at more efficiencies by working with the same people repeatedly. And again, that's over time, that repetitiveness ends up being able to tighten those tools and those things that you're using as well.
Yeah, that is fantastic advice.
And I'll just add to that, I don't actually see a lot of people doing that. We have quite a few customers that we've gotten into that rhythm because we're always monitoring results with our customers and saying that market was great. Let's go back in. Let's do more. Let's extract more value. And in sales, you've got to think of it through the lens of hunting versus farming. Hunting is when we're going out all over the place and seeing what deals come back in. Farming, if you think of it like when you're planting a crop and then you're reaping the rewards of that crop, it's the same when you start to dominate a market. The more you can farm that market and keep cycling through, the better. So that would be one thing I'd definitely say. And a lot of people still spread themselves too thin over too many markets. What you end up with there is duplication of processes, but maybe those processes need to be nuanced because this market's different to this one. That county assessor and title company over there is different to this one. So again, really just look for those efficiencies where you can go deep as opposed to broad.
That's a really fantastic piece of advice. I love that distinction between hunting versus farming. And what it brought up for me as I was listening to that is there are other real estate professionals in different niches and in different industries within real estate that have been doing this game for a long time. And we're not reinventing the wheel, right? This is not, for example, all of that, the hunting versus farming and going deep into markets, that sounds like a lot of the realtor training that I've been through as a real estate agent. And so if you look to other real estate professionals, get into some of these, groups that also have realtors and they're talking about how they market, how they farm areas. They literally call the areas that they work farm areas because of that tactic and going in.
That tactic, yeah.
Absolutely. Becoming a professional and expert in that specific. I mean, I've seen some realtors go as specific as like they only work one neighborhood and that's it. And everyone knows them in that neighborhood because they get a Christmas card and all this other stuff every year. So
all those personal touches. Yeah.
Yes.
100%, Kendall. Yeah. Hi, Dan. I see Dan's joined us. Yeah. So it's really interesting to go to that question because there is a tipping point where doing more doesn't necessarily mean casting the net wider. Doing more means going deeper.
That's fantastic. Let's say that someone is tightening their systems, tightening their processes. They are maximizing all of the resources that they have. How do they then know, okay, I have maxed out my current setup of resources. It's either time to grow more or scale more, or what does that whole conversation look like? What are some key indicators that someone is ready for a next step of growth?
Yeah, really good question. I guess a couple of key indicators would be number one, make sure that you do have a plan in place and that plan is enabled, because what a lot of people that go into the next phase of growth do is they're recognizing that when it's almost too late. And we're guilty of that too. We've done that in our own business where it's very, holy cow, now we need a new system, a new person, a new this. So try where possible to really think through that strategically and what that growth looks like. So is there a tipping point in the amount of leads you're getting through, the conversions you're doing, the amount of deals that you can handle, the amount of hours that your team is working before they start to ask for overtime? So look for those little signs early on and don't wait until they get to the point that they're out of control. And the reason I say that is you've got to think of ramp up time. So ramp up time, if you're implementing a new system, hiring a new person, changing CRMs, whatever it is that you're doing to get to that next phase, it's not going to happen overnight. It might take 1 or 2 months before that's really embedded and efficient, whether that is a person or a process. So number one, have the plan, have a strategy, make sure that you're looking at those early indicators. If you don't have that, number two is those indicators will start to cause you pain. And it's not physical pain. It's often disguised in stress or anxiety or overwhelm. So look for those areas where either you or your team members, or maybe even your resources outside of that, like your title company, your realtor, if you're working with a realtor, if you start to get pushback. So pushback is happening because they're at capacity, they're full. Excuse me. Or even for yourself, if you're giving yourself pushback. And what this looks like, by the way, in our own pushback is excuses. So when we start making excuses as to why I haven't got to that task or why I didn't finish that thing when I was meant to finish that thing, that's a tell. And that tell is that little voice that's going, maybe you need to look at this. So again, look for those areas where you're hitting ceilings. And when those ceilings are hit is a good time to reassess. Now that reassessment, in my world, that reassessment doesn't mean always just adding in more stuff. What it might mean is that we look at, number one, those existing SOPs and the efficiency of them. Number two, the systems we're already using, and is there anything more we can extract from that? And here's an example. Someone I was talking to the other day is using Pebble, and I love Pebble. And they openly said to me, I'm probably using only about 20% of the capacity of what this can do. And they were thinking of changing CRMs. And I was like, before you go through the heartache and headache of trying to change a CRM, first, book a call with your provider and get them to show you everything that this system can do. And if you're not getting the traction you want, let me know. I'll jump in. Really make sure that you're extracting as much value and efficiency out of the things you already have before you decide to change.
If you're enjoying this episode of the OnlyLandFans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action. That is gold advice. One of the things that really stuck out to me was that ramp up time. And we've all been through it. Whenever you are implementing new things, whether it be a new person, a new system, a new CRM, a new piece of technology, it's not as simple as just flipping a switch and then now you're running at capacity, right? You're trying, again, it's your wing just fell off to the airplane. Now you have to attach it back on because it is hard. That ramp up time, it's not just that your efficiency is going to wane a little bit, but you're actually going to experience more pain because it takes more energy and more effort to implement things. Even if you planned for it, you knew it was coming, just managing a new person, just onboarding that person, just training that person is going to cause some ramp up time, right?
Correct. And even just training yourself on a new system has ramp up time, all of that stuff as well. The other thing I'd probably add in there when I talked just before about having a plan and making sure you're looking for those indicators of when time to switch, time to assess, time to relook at things happens. As you're going through that and you've got your plan there, make sure that you're starting to allocate a portion of your profits to that growth phase. Because here's the other mistake I see people make. They get to that ceiling point that I mentioned where all of a sudden pain is present. We're at overwhelm. There's too much happening. We're this, we're that. But then they need help. They need a new person or a process or a system. And maybe they need to pay some resources to help them implement that because they're short on time, but they don't have the budget for it. So now they end up in a whole nother world of pain where they're trying to do it all themselves and can't. And so now things start failing. And guess what we see there? This slow decline of people eventually leaving all this good work that they've put in place because they feel like they're just in overwhelm and can't handle it. So every deal that you do, not only do you need to put a percentage of that deal profit aside for future marketing, future things that you need to keep your pipeline going, put a small portion aside for your growth bucket.
That is so good. It reminds me of the book.
It doesn't have to be big, right? It's just
exactly.
It might just be a couple of $1,000s that you need to implement this new system or bring on a new resource because you're going to have that ramp up time before they start producing for you. So really think about that.
That is so good. That is so good. So what are some of the common hurdles you've seen when clients of yours are trying to grow and they're just bashing up against some of these hurdles? There's patterns that I think that you've seen.
There are.
So what are some of those common hurdles when people are trying to grow?
Yep. The biggest one here, and this is going to be a bit controversial, but as leaders of businesses and entrepreneurs and out there doing our thing, you got to learn to get out of your own way. So if you want to go to the next level and now you're working in your business and you're like, oh, I really want to work on my business. First thing you got to think about is what can I let go of to create space for that? Again, coming back to the beginning of this conversation, writing out your SOPs and things like that. making sure that when you're at that stage of going, look, I currently do all the due diligence for my deals, but it takes me 2 hours a day. I need to now hand that off to someone. So if you've got your SOPs written and everything mapped out, should be pretty easy to transition that to someone so that you can allocate those 2 hours to something else. What the cautionary part here though, Kendall, if you create space, so you've created more space in your day or your week to do more, make sure that the promise you make to yourself is you fill that with things that move the needle. I keep saying this moves the needle, right? Because if you then end up just doing more operational stuff that isn't moving the needle, you've just moved the problem. So really think through what that looks like for you. And at regular intervals, always ask yourself the question, what is one thing this month, just one thing that I can let go of and bring someone else up to do, so that creates more space for me to grow and do more. So the biggest hurdle is ourselves more than anything. The second one is probably fear. So the first one, when I say ourselves, that comes from a place of control. I need to control everything in order to feel like I'm progressing, right? The second one comes from a place of fear. So when we are in fear mode, we're scared of growth. We're scared of, is this system going to work? Am I going to hire the right person, etc.? What that equates to is not only lost time, because the time that we're taking to get over the fear is lost time of actually moving forward, but a loss in confidence of things around us. Because if we're operating from a place of fear, we tend to also then be operating from a place of scarcity. And if we're in scarcity mode, we're trying to protect as opposed to grow.
Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's triple-digit flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything. That is huge. That is so huge.
It takes a lot of courage to put up the mirror and ask yourself that stuff, right?
It really does. It really does. And I think that anyone that has grown, or if you've tried to stretch or do anything new, you're going to experience that at some point. And you have to make the conscious decision to say, no, I can do this, and I've planned for this, and I've got resources in place, and this is the plan, and we're going to move forward. But I know with myself, even something that I found throughout all of the different phases of my growth is I also found that I was neglecting to nurture the visionary component to my leadership in my business. Yeah. And so what I mean by that is that I think that it's really important for the leader of any business or company operation to also grow from a self-development standpoint, feeding your soul, for lack of a better word, just so you're looking at your business with fresh eyes and you're getting out of the operations. And I think that in the very beginning, operations is extremely important, especially when you're a one-man show or a one-woman show, but you definitely have to start making space in what you do to be able to grow into the type of leader that can even manage a business that particular size, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I think at certain points, maybe it's appropriate to get yourself a coach or a mentor or someone who is at the stage that you want to be at, that you can just shadow. Really look outside of yourself to look for that inspiration and that growth as well. And I think the really important thing is at regular intervals, pause and congratulate yourself on how far you've come. I think so often when we're in a growth phase or we're trying to scale, it just feels like it's fraught with problems because everything feels new and you're trying to work this out or trying to implement this and all that. The fact that you're doing what you're doing, just pause and congratulate yourself, because it is tough. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it, but they're not. So
absolutely,
make sure you recognize that growth in yourself, folks. I was on a call with a customer today who's been with us just over a year. He's just hired 2 new people. And if he's listening, JP, you know who you are. But 12 months ago, never done a deal. Was in that stage of, I don't know where to start, AJ, help me get started. And is now at the stage, has got 2 people, is working actively on his business, is implementing new things, is really in control of stuff. And I actually said to him, just pause for a sec and just recognize how far you've come from 12 months ago, because this is awesome. And he's, yeah, we don't often do that, do we? I'm like, no, we don't.
We don't. Yeah, that's incredible. And that's a fantastic way to look at it as well, is that everything can definitely feel like a challenge, because it is, right? There's the cliche, new level, new devil. And that's because everything that we try so hard to get to the next level, and then it's like, oh, wait, the next mountain peak is just a bunch of more challenges, right? And so I love that idea and that stance of, look how far you've come, because that's going to give you the inspiration and the motivation to keep going. But I also love the piece about having a mentor, having a coach, having a counselor, someone that has done what you are trying to do, so you can have that little bit of a frame of reference, because it can be really difficult to get a lay of the land if you've never been there before.
Yeah. Yep. Pardon the pun, lay of the land, but yeah.
Lay of the land. Love that. That would be a great podcast name, by the way.
It would. Yeah.
I think I'm going to have my people get on that. Let's talk about streamlining operations for efficiency, right? So let's say that you've grown, you've added resources. How do you go about making sure that you are maximizing and streamlining everything? We've talked about SOPs, but can we get down into even more nuts and bolts of what are some indicators that we can see in black and white that say, hey, okay, we need to streamline this process a bit more?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me think about where to take that question, because I can take that in a number of different directions. Let's talk about people first of all. I think they're one of the biggest costs in our business, and they're definitely one of the biggest things that we have to manage as well. So there's two trains of thought here. One train of thought is, I'm going to hire one VA to do all of my due diligence and my comps. I'm then going to have another VA that's going to be focused on disposition and get my ads and everything all together and do all that. The first thing I always like to question there is, where's your redundancy? Because if someone leaves and you need to plug a hole, that's going to put a bit of a gap in your business, right? So we actually took the approach in our business that everybody does everything. Now, a lot of the mindset that some people have around that is, oh, but what if they take my business and run away? They're not. But if they do, good luck to them, right? If you treat people right and you're really valuing your resources, they're not going to do that. So let's be real about that. But what you then do is you create ownership in your business. Because if I am across everything and all of a sudden a team member is unwell, number one, the other team member can step in and run what they need to for that day. Number two, when we're creating ownership on things, you tend to find that people care more. When they care more, they're more likely to give you suggestions. When they give you suggestions, they're more likely to own the solution for that. If you go, that's a great idea, go for it. So what you want to create is that culture in your team of always improving, of making sure that we're sharing workload and resources. But that also allows you, if you've got, even if it's just two team members, for example, and you're training them up on everything, that also allows different perspectives on things that can also create more efficiencies. Because everyone comes to jobs with different skill sets and different ideas, right? How we create a culture to maximize that is super important. So that's probably on the people side. Let me come back to your question and ask it again, and I'll see which other direction I was going to take it, because my brain's gone, oh, it's a long day.
Yeah. Essentially, how do you make sure that you are being efficient and streamlining with the resources that you have before you grow to, or try to grow to, the next level?
Yeah, cool. The other thing I would say with resources, again, if we just focus on people as opposed to systems, first of all, if you are in a growth mode where you're trying to add more on before you get to that tipping point of scaling with what you have as opposed to keep growing, I would also make sure, if you've got the right people in place, look at how you can develop those people and give them more responsibility, more growth, more outcome. Number one, they stick with you longer. Number two, again, you're driving more ownership. Then when you need to add more people on, add in the lower level and train them up. Add in the lower level and train them up. I think sometimes people look at their team and go, oh, now I need a salesperson. And they go external to look for that because they don't think their current team has the capability. I always say, give people the chance to show you that they do or don't have that capability before you go and try and reinvent the wheel. Because sometimes it's easier to bring someone up and train them if they've got the right values, the right attitude, etc., and then bring someone in lower that can also be mentored by the existing team members. So look at ways that you can really maximize that opportunity of what you've got. In terms of systems as well and getting efficiencies there, again, this is going to go in two directions here, right? One is technology. When you're looking at different technology, always ask what works with what. What I mean by that, if you've got a CRM that doesn't work well with Zapier or Make or some of the different apps out there that help you to integrate things, then maybe look for one that does. You want to make sure that as you're growing as you're building the airplane and bolting on a wing or putting the landing gear on, that wing and that landing gear is coherent and speaks to one another and works efficiently together. If you've got disparate systems and processes that don't, and I'm not saying they all have to combine, but they have to be synergistic in their approach, right? One's got to flow into the next pretty easily. If you don't have something that works that way, then start to look for something that does. So technology is probably the other thing. Then it becomes more about repeatable processes. So what can you do more of in your existing processes that enables that scale to happen? An example being like maybe your due diligence template. Now, if you've got a due diligence template or a comps template that is different per county, maybe look at how you merge that into one document and one format that can be used for any county, rather than having those disparate things that are out there. Again, we're scratching the surface here on a couple of things, right? But yeah, that's where I'd start with that, Kendall.
That is absolutely fantastic. You mentioned earlier about creating culture, and I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. So there are some major differences outside of just the obvious differences between being a one-person show and having a few different employees. And we all know that once you bring people onto your team, now you have to manage those people. You have to create some type of culture. You're adding another responsibility onto your plate. And how do you go about managing as you grow? What are some tips and tricks and tools that you have that you found that's helped business owners to manage? Because they're doing other things too, and now they've added this managerial responsibility.
Correct. Yeah, correct. I've actually got a bit of a model that I use across our team that I created a while ago, and it's called Raft B. So Raft, RAFT - B. So Raft B being, I looked at it through the concept of when you've got, coming to this whole airplane mode as well. If an airplane crashes, what's the first thing that gets pushed out of the airplane? The safety rafts, right? The slides come out come the safety rafts. Same when you're on a boat. And those are a place of safety for people, but also a place of refuge for people as well. So in leadership, and when we're talking about managing businesses, we really need to think about what is the safety environment that we create for people to do their best. So Raft B, a couple of things that stands for. Number one is responsibility. And responsibility is being super clear with people about what you expect from them, but then making sure that you're defining how to get there and giving them the systems and processes in order to do that efficiently. Again, I see a lot of people that hire VAs and just think that the people's going to solve the problem. It doesn't. So what are they responsible for? How do you define that? How do you measure it? How do you set that up? A then becomes accountability. Because once you've set that up for them, if you've given them all the right training and everything, you've got to let go and let someone be actually accountable. If they're not accountable and something goes wrong, and you're the one trying to make sure that everything's getting over the line, you're never going to get that person to lift, and you're never going to get them to own mistakes. So accountability is one thing. How do I create a culture of accountability that even if something doesn't go well, my team can come back and tell me? They can look at the SOP and go, hey, AJ, I think that this is a bit outdated. I've gone ahead and updated that. That's accountability, right? Where people feel like they have ownership in something and they can do it. The F stands for feedback. So feedback is always create feedback loops. Now, when I say feedback loop, culture comes into play here, right? You've got a culture that feedback is just one way, that you're just giving feedback to them. That's not a feedback loop. That's just you giving feedback all the time. And 9 times out of 10, it's always going to be about things that need improving, right? Which can beat people down over time. If you've got the first two right, your feedback loop should be both ways. So I'm going to give you feedback on what I think is working really well, but also the stuff that I think we might want to review and push it back to you because you're accountable. Push it back to you to go and review that and come back to me with a solution, not me coming up with the answers all the time. Secondary, though, is I want you to give me feedback. On a daily call with my team, I'm giving them feedback on stuff and we're assessing. The last thing I ask on every single call is, guys, what do you need from me? What support do you need? What knowledge do you want more of? What training are we looking at? What do you need from me? Okay. If they can't tell you that, leads to the last one, which is we've gone through the R, the A, the F. The last one is T, which is trust. If people aren't giving you feedback, they don't trust you. Point blank. So if you ask, hey, how's everything going? And every time you ask, people go, it's great. It's awesome. It's fine. That's not feedback. That's not trust. If you say, how's everything going? They're like, oh, I had 2 really good calls with the seller today. Had one call that went really bad, and I'd love you to give me some support on that. Let's listen to the recording. That's trust. When people feel like they can come forward to you and say, hey, this is going on. I need your help with this, and not feel like there's going to be a pushback on that or a blame or shame on that as well. That's trust. So really thinking about what's a trusting environment look like, where your resources can come to you with ideas and solutions or things they need help on without feeling like they're going to be put down here. And I'm saying all this stuff and it sounds really basic 101, but I cannot tell you how many people don't run their businesses this way. The last one, so that's the raft, okay, place of safety, place of togetherness. The B stands for boundaries. Because ultimately, once you've got the raft in place and those things are working really well, you've got dialogue around that stuff, you've got processes and systems around the R, A, F, and T. So all of that stuff's working really well. You do want to also be really defined by boundaries. And what I mean by boundaries is, where does their job start and stop? And where does your job begin and stop as well? Because if I can't define what the boundary is for my job or your job, so within the realm of everything that we're doing, here's your area of specialization, here's my area of specialization, what we end up doing is people start treading on each other and we end up with this feeling of, well, what's yours versus what's mine? So again, really understanding what that boundary is for people and just defining it for them so they know the scope within what they can do.
That is a masterclass in and of itself.
I could talk about that stuff all day long.
It's one of my favorite topics because I think that not enough people talk about it. And it's also, so it's considered like a soft skill, but boy, does it help you to hit your goals. Oh, yeah. And so what I'd love to do is dive in a little bit deeper. I know that one of the things that you and I both love about the land business, one of the many things, is the fact that it can be done remotely. And so oftentimes we have team members from different corners of the globe. And so it's one thing to be able to be in person and see people every day. How do you go about creating cultures of excellence in a remote world?
I laugh at that because we've got in Supercharge offers now, we've got over 20 people. I've literally only met one of them in person. And wow. That was only a couple of weeks ago. The rest, they've all been with us for years, never met in person. Wow. And I actually don't think it makes a difference. And here's why. If I think that it does make a difference, it's going to lead me to treat them differently. And I shouldn't. Regardless if they're on Zoom with me or if they're in person, it's the same conversation I should be having and the same interaction that we use. What we then need to do, if we come back to that raft B component, what we then need to do is think about what are the mechanisms and ways of working that enable us to work really effectively, even though we're not face-to-face. Systems, Slack, project management tools, reporting tools, different things that you can, again, systematize. Now, this is especially important if you're out of growth phase and into scaling phase, because in scaling phase, you've got less time to work on the minutiae of your business. You don't have time to go into Excel and run a report. You should automate that so that you know how many calls have been taken this month. What does that look like? What's in our pipeline? That kind of stuff you should be able to set up so that you can have conversations about it at any point in time without needing to necessarily do more work around it. We treat our team the same on virtual as what we do in person. The other thing as well with our team, none of them are called VAs. Their titles are customer service, project manager, data analyst, data expert, data concierge, sales closer, sales setter. The list goes on, right? They have those boundaries. They've got clearly defined roles that we want to give them full ownership of. Calling someone a VA for me is, yes, they are a virtual assistant. They're virtual and they're assisting me in my business, but that's not how I identify them. I identify them through their strengths, what they bring to their job, how they're performing in their role, how they're growing. Our team's actually been with us. I'm really proud to say our team's actually been with us a long time. And we've in Supercharged offers, not one person has left. They've been with us from the beginning, and we just keep growing them because we trust them, and we're keeping giving them more stuff to do so that they feel like they're growing and not staying stagnant either.
Absolutely. I love that. And you mentioned daily calls with your team. Can you talk about the importance of that, especially in a remote environment where you can't all come and sit at the same table in the same room?
Yeah, exactly. So the importance of that is making sure that you don't create a culture that everything is on email or Slack or WhatsApp or what have you. You need to still have conversations. And those conversations need to be multifaceted. So number one, checking in on people generally. How are you? What's going on in your family? How are things? Have a conversation, get a temperature check for stuff. Every now and then I'll jump on a call and say, how's you going? And I get, I'm good. That's an indicator for me that something's not right. So will I ask that person publicly and the rest of the team? No. After the call, will I send them a little message and say, hey, can you jump back on Zoom for 5 minutes? I just want to check in. Yes. Again, feedback loop, looking for those nuances and understanding where your team is at and making sure you've got that open dialogue around anything and everything. You don't get that from a WhatsApp message or an email. So having that daily interaction allows you to do a temperature check, but it also allows you to collaborate. Because the calls that I have daily, I've got a number of calls during the week with my team individually, but equally we have group calls daily. Our sales team has a group call. Our project team has a group call. Our data team has a group call. Now that's a lot of time for me, but that time for them when we can all get on a call together and go, hey, how's this going? And one team member can say to the next, oh, I'm actually a bit overwhelmed with that today. I've pushed that to tomorrow. And I'm like, no, that has to happen today. So the other two, can you guys jump in? Have you got some space to jump in and help? Invariably, people are like, yeah, I do. Give it to me after this call. Send it to me. I'll get it done. So again, that in-person collaboration, I say in-person because we're not physically together, but when we're on a call together, that collaboration of people stepping up and stepping in happens. Doesn't happen when you're just on email.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important distinction because in a world where we've just talked about getting as efficient as possible and we're creating as many automations and systems where things can move with as little friction as possible, it can be really easy to miss those opportunities for that interpersonal connection like you just talked about. And so you have to be intentional about that kind of thing, or it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And don't do it to tick the box. Do it so that you're genuinely interested in your team, their progress, how they're feeling, how they're going, what support they need. I have career conversations with my team every couple of months too. Where are they at? What else do they want to get exposed to? What are some more skill sets that they want to learn? That stuff, these are humans. Need to treat them as such.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I love the fact that you use the term team. It doesn't surprise me that you use that term, but that's very different from my staff, right? A team is very different from a staff.
Or my VA. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And even down to, we talked at the beginning of this call about being intentional with things like your strategy. Our team knows our strategy in and out. We've got a big project called Project Thunderbolt that's a constant where we're always looking at process improvements and things we're adding, our roadmap, our runway, all of that stuff. Every single team member knows what's in it, and they've got the opportunity to give feedback at any point in time and even put their hand up and go, I want to get involved in that. So don't feel like by sharing everything about your business is going to be too much for your team. Because if we put ourselves in their shoes, coming back to that raft B that I said, that whole element of trust comes with you also being super open about your business, where it's at, what you're doing, all this stuff, because people buy into that, right? And they want to feel part of it. We're very open and transparent in our team.
I absolutely love that. Do you have any resources or books or anything like that if someone I really want to get more into this, that you can share with them that way? Start growing more in that area?
There's probably two that I would recommend. One is called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And the E-Myth is not E for electronic, it's the entrepreneurial myth. And that is, you can be good at something, but it doesn't mean you're going to be good at running a business in that something. And it really helps you to unpack what are your strengths that you play to if you want to be an entrepreneur or a business owner, and what are the things you might need to systematize or outsource to play to those strengths. The other one is going to be Atomic Habits. You actually gave me that, and I love it. All those little micro decisions that you make that start to that roll up into what does good culture and behaviors start to look like for you and your team, and how do you display that as a leader. So Atomic Habits was also awesome.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We've got just a couple more minutes left here. I don't want to end our conversation without talking about metrics and measuring success. And so, what are some of the different methods or metrics that you actually track to measure success when it comes to scaling your land business?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think we need a whole nother session on that. I'm going to give you a high level answer. But in any business, I'm going to talk about this through the lens of a land business, right? Not supercharged offers. So a land business, the metrics that you want to look at is number one, obviously your conversion metrics, response rates, conversion rate, time it takes to convert, because again, every county is different. So make sure you're monitoring this per county, not just per marketing, because it might mean that you're making those nuances and adjustments because one county is performing differently to the other. In each of your deals, I want people to start looking at things like cost per acquisition, cost per deal, really looking at what your exit is when you're making money on a deal, basic metrics like that. As you're growing, what you want to do is, when you're coming back to the beginning, when we talked about growth versus scaling, when you've got your cost per deal down pat, that cost should remain constant. And then as you're doing more deals, your cost per deal should come down. Some of those metrics that you want to put in place is maybe every 3 to 6 months. What's the reduction in cost per deal that you want to start to see because you're getting more efficient in all this other stuff that we've spoken about?
That is fantastic. And I just have to reiterate, I love that idea of tracking the time it takes to convert a lead into a deal. That's something that I don't hear very many people talk about.
Yeah. And I talk about that a lot because the market has changed. People are like, oh, I'm not getting the same response as 2021. And I'm like, that's because we're not in 2021 anymore, Toto. We're in 2023 and the market has shifted. So then on a quarterly basis, looking at your time it takes to do a deal is super important, because when you're then doing some forward planning, if you're going to go, we spoke about hunting and farming, right? But if I got some really awesome deals and I'm going to go back in and farm that county, but the average deal took me 5 months to do, then I need to build that into my lead time when it comes to when I'm expecting a return on investment from that county. Okay. Versus another county that we got heaps of deals, landed in an awesome subdivision, lots of buyers out there. We turn deals around in 2 months. Great. So really think about that when it comes to planning forward.
That is so good. That is so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. AJ, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please make sure that you join us for part 3 of our masterclass with AJ next Wednesday. And then we will also have another podcast, live virtual meetup this Thursday. Take care, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other 7-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at OnlyLandFans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.